The black vote in the United States tended to be Republican, coming out of the Civil War, the party of Lincoln, the party that emancipated the slaves, and so on. And opposed to Southern Democrats that were opposed to Reconstruction and so on. African Americans were loyal members of the Republican Party for years. That begins to change during the New Deal. Franklin Roosevelt, New Deal policies, lower income blacks gravitate to that. Democratic Party is not just dominated by the Southern Democrats as much. Come 1948, Strom Thurmond takes the Southern Democrats out of the Democratic Convention. Harry Truman desegregates the military, and blacks begin to shift a bit more towards the Democrats. Along come the 1960s. That shift becomes more complete. And so, having been overwhelmingly Republican for decades, black vote becomes overwhelmingly Democrat in the range of like 90%. By American politics standards, there are not many groups that vote 90% consistently for one party or another, right? And now, even the black community is beginning to variegate a little bit, right? You've got a growing black middle class. You've got some African Americans out of more conservative religious backgrounds that are not as liberal as the Democratic Party on some cultural issues. And so I would argue that that presents a sort of low-hanging fruit for the Republican Party. If they shift correctly, they could pick up some of those middle-class blacks and some of those religious conservatives. And I think they were in the process of doing that. And then along comes President Trump. And a certain inclination to play to some really racially conservative elements of his base. So no time for Black Lives Matter. There are good people on both sides in Charlottesville. Don't know who the Proud Boys are, but they seem to like me. We don't want any racial sensitivity training anywhere that the federal government funds anymore. Blue Lives Matter and all of this. In doing so, I think at least the current president and the party that exists behind him and doesn't seem to have bucked him a lot on this, has driven the black vote back into the Democratic fold even more fully. And I think you're going to see in the turnout and in the results this time that you're going to be back to 90+% black vote for the Democratic ticket. And I don't know that much ground had to be given up by the Republicans, but they gave it up. The voting down of the Voting Rights Act, voter IDs, and so on have come to be framed in much of the black community as an attempt to keep blacks, and particularly low-income blacks, from exercising their franchise. And I read this into the long lines that we're seeing for early voting in the black communities. It's almost a civil rights issue this time. We're not going to let all that we fought for be taken away by the current administration. And so it's taken on a bigger life of its own and almost turned into a civil rights statement. Michelle Obama said the other day, bring your chair, bring your picnic basket, be ready to stay overnight if you have to, but vote. And they're getting that message from the NBA players. They're getting that message from traditional civil rights leaders. And I think you're going to see a very large African-American turnout. You already are.